All right, and we are back. Welcome into another episode of Chasing 1969, a New York Jets podcast. It is October 9th, Victory Monday. Going to be recapping the Jets' 31-21 victory over the Denver Broncos, moving to 2-3 on the season. Before we get to all that, make sure to follow us on all of our socials at NYJ_Chasing69. Theodore is at Teddy Huncho. I am at Spring Blake with 4 A's in there. We talk about the Spring Blake, but Teddy Huncho is just as funny of a name. I feel like we don't give it enough credit.
Yeah, that is true. Teddy Huncho. Shout out to Quavo of the Migos. Well, it is still Teddy Huncho, right? Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Teddy Huncho.
Yeah. So yeah, follow me. Check it out.
Theodore, how you doing? Good.
Doing good, man. Big win today. We needed it.
Good way to kick off one of these Monday pods, not just being like overly depressed after the Patriots game. We felt kind of okay, I guess, last week, albeit a loss, but a good victory Monday. Even our first victory Monday was the, just dampened. Like saddest podcast I think ever recorded. We were depressed for just 30 minutes. So this is a good one to celebrate.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it all week, and I feel like everyone, not just us, said it. Like, it really was a must-win for this Jets team. You had to be able to go out and beat a Broncos team that's not very good. You had to go to 2-3 as opposed to 1-4 and kind of stay in the mix. Like, you look at it and you think we're half a game behind the Bills right now. If we can get another win next week, potentially, you're sitting at 500. So yeah, I mean, it's huge for this Jets team to kind of show like, hey, we can at least play NFL football. Maybe not the prettiest win, probably a lot to clean up. I don't think it was nearly a perfect game from the Jets, and I think there's tons of kind of negatives that you can point to, but to be able to go out and score 31 still and win the game, despite all that, was definitely good to see. So, pretty exciting.
Yeah, very ugly first half. First half was very frustrating. Play calling, execution, defensively at times for a little bit as well too. But they always tightened up. The defense always did in the red zone. We have the safety in there, but then the offense and the team as a whole really kicked things up into the second half, outscoring the Broncos 23-8 over the final 2 quarters there. You obviously have the 2-minute drill where you don't get out of bounds, you miss out on a field goal there. So I think the first half itself, very ugly. It still wasn't the prettiest thing we've seen in the world in the second half, but it was a second half effort by the Jets that has them leaving Denver victorious.
Yeah, I think we should start with the offense, I feel like, just because that is, a big story. You obviously had 31 points from the Jets today, but you did have, 7 scored on the fumble recovery at the end of the game to ice it. You had a
Bryce
safety.
Hall, shout out.
Yep, shout out Bryce Hall, our boy. So, not the prettiest game from the Jets offense. They had a ton of freaking field goals, 5 field goals. And then the one big Breece Hall touchdown. So, you look at that performance and it definitely is disappointing. You feel like they left a lot of points on the board, and we talked about it this week. Like, it felt like the Jets should have had the ability to blow this team out, and if 2 of those field goals inside the freaking 10-yard line, they're able to punch in and score, this game really does get out of hand a lot quicker and it feels a lot better for the Jets. But because of, whatever you want to call it, play calling, lack of execution, that didn't really happen, So as a whole, I look at this offensively and there's definitely some negatives there, but I do appreciate the fact that, it's good to see your explosive players be explosive. And then you still did put together 5 scoring drives, like whether they didn't end in touchdowns or not, it's at least a positive that we were able to kind of move the ball, So yeah. I'm not going to kill them, but there's definitely things to be improved on the offensive side.
Yeah, especially considering how bad this defense has been all year. And especially, it took them so long to get things started. You're right. The offense was moving. It was a balanced effort. You look at the end of the day, just about I'm going to call it 200 passing yards. Zach Wilson finished with 199, but you had 200 plus on the ground as well, too. So very evenly distributed. Breece Hall was finally able to take over, get off of that, limitation or snap count that they were ramping him up on. He takes 22 carries for 177 and a touchdown. Also had 3 receptions for 17 yards through the air. So a big Breece Hall game. And then yeah, the offense was just fluid. It wasn't always pretty at times, and I think especially when the Jets got into the red zone, it became very frustrating watching the play calling again and again. It was very predictable and basically the same setup every single drive once they were in there. So that was the reason for a lot of the field goals. But you're right, can't be too mad. Ball was moving up and down the field, and 31 points, albeit 7 from the defense, is still better than what we've been used to before this even Kansas City game last week.
Yeah, definitely agree. And I mean, right. So digging into it, I mean, the biggest thing I really want to talk about is the play calling, because to me, I feel like we're almost limiting the ceiling of the team, in some ways with the way that we're play calling.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times it feels like it did last year. Like we had a drive where we quite literally ran the ball every single play, and we gave Zach one pass play and he ended up running it. And then, the final play of the drive was a 3rd and goal where we finally passed the ball and it was an incomplete pass. And it kind of feels like that it was the story in the red zone, as we would get around the 10-yard line and we'd say, hey, we don't really trust Zach Wilson. We're able to run the ball. Let's just run it twice and see what we can do. And to me, I understand that the running game was working, but in order for us to really take this next step as like an offense as a team, you do have to show some trust in Zach Wilson, right? It's like obviously he hasn't shown us the most in his entire career, but you're looking in the past couple weeks and you're seeing a kid who has improved completion percentage. Last week, the game plan was, hey, let's trust Zach and put the ball in his hands. And he really did execute that well, So then you come into this week and it feels like we're so scared to give him that opportunity to say, hey, we're on the 9-yard line, throw a touchdown pass on first down, like I understand that the running game was working and we need to move it. But to me, it's kind of like, we're just turtling in the most important spot on the field, like Nathaniel Hackett wants to talk about the gold zone, but so far when we're in the gold zone, he really just kind of says, hey, I'm too scared to really trust Zach Wilson. Let's just run the ball with Breece. And to me, that was just immensely frustrating to see over and over again.
It almost makes me wonder, because Nathaniel Hackett had a terrible red zone offense last year in Denver. I think for a while it was like one of the worst streaks that they had in all of football. So an abysmal red zone offense last year. He specifically was play calling red zone for Aaron Rodgers, those 2 MVP seasons in Green Bay. And what we've seen since then almost makes me just think that he was letting Rodgers just call whatever plays he wanted.
Right.
And Rodgers was kind of dictating because it has been really bad. This red zone, one run doesn't work, another run doesn't work. Okay, 3rd and long, cool. Like at least we're not seeing that to start off drives anymore. We're not seeing that, be the first 2, 3 and outs of every, offensive series that we've had. But we are still seeing it in the red zone. And you're right. The next step, I guess, in, trusting Zach Wilson would be kind of letting him rip there. So we're not settling for 5 field goals in a game and we're, being able to actually put up touchdowns on the board.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it would have been awesome. And I do think you can go ahead.
I was going to say, we should say as well, too, before we continue to go, congratulations, Nathaniel Hackett. Very happy day for him. A lot of great stuff.
No, 100%. And I don't want to be too negative because I do think in the second half, I think a lot of those things did improve. The play calling improved. They started, allowing Zach Wilson to throw it on first down, and they started running those play action passes. And it was really good to see all that stuff get going. But it was almost like, why do we need to wait until, the 2-minute drill at the end of the half and the second half to really start running these concepts that are off of things that we have already established? Like it felt like we could have got that going earlier in the game, and to be fair, the Denver's pass rush was getting to us early. There was some, quick pockets for Zach Wilson where he was just getting hit right away. So, it could be a multitude of things, but it did feel like they were really more willing to open up the playbook later in the game, which makes sense. You do need to set stuff up, but
Hmm.
at the end of the day, like, this has been a team that has been slow starting, slow starting, slow starting. I mean, we scored our first 3 points in a first quarter of all season, today, and that was all we were able to put up. So, not too bad. And again, the same thing I said about Zach is like, we were able to have 6 scoring drives, which is awesome. But it's like, let's start trusting the quarterback a little bit and say, hey, let's throw the ball here because we need to start punching into the end zone.
Yeah. I think for Zach specifically, the last 2 weeks now, I just continue to see like, hey, this is good enough for the team that we have.
Yep.
This is. It's
Yep.
not good enough to get this team to a Super Bowl, but it's good enough to get this team closer to the playoffs than to the first overall pick. 19 of 26, a very efficient 200 yards today. The interception, it's not one of those where he just threw it up in a triple coverage and it was ugly. That is something that, that is one of the flukiest interceptions he'll get all season and probably all of his career.
100%. I feel like people totally jumped on that, and the fact he didn't throw a touchdown today, the fact he had under 200 yards, and we're like, oh, Zach, it's same old Zach Wilson. Like, to me, I do think he regressed from last week. Like, last week, to me, Zach Wilson really kind of did everything he could, other than the fumble at the end of the game. He really was just sharp throughout the entire game, making every play. You look at this week, it wasn't like Zach Wilson was the catalyst of the offense. Breece Hall is rushing for 177 yards and gets the breakaway touchdown, and the running game is really helping us. But Zach played an immensely complimentary game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't like last year where we're sitting here after a win and we're saying, well, Zach threw 52 completion percentage for 140 and 2 interceptions, but luckily, we were able to kind of piece it together anyway. It was like, hey, this wasn't a pretty game, but Zach did enough to keep us in it, did enough to win, didn't lose us the game. And like you said, I agree that interception, I mean, I kind of like it, because I liked the play call there, that it was 3rd and 5 late in the game and we took
Mm-hmm.
a shot. And it's a
Right.
50-50 ball. He could have thrown it more outside. He could, and those are little
Higher
things.
outside.
But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's like, I'm happy that he's thrown up a 50-50 ball to our best player. I want to see that more, you know. But I do want to just throw out this one stat, because this is the big thing, is the completion percentage to me. Like, in the first 24 starts of Zach Wilson's career, he had one game of over a 70% completion percentage. And then now in the past 2, he's had 2,
Yeah.
and that's an immense step forward from 52, 55. So do I think Zach Wilson is like this perfect quarterback? No, but I think he's showing us that those worries we had of like, can we just be a normal offense that's able to move the ball and get down the field? He can do that.
The one thing we have been asking since starting this show, go back to the last regular season, was just like, keep it simple, stupid. It's just the easy stuff. And you are
Mm-hmm.
seeing him just hit the easy stuff again and again. Some of the throws are still tight window, impressive throws, but a lot of the time it's just like, balls in my hand, guys open,
Check
throw.
it down.
Yep,
Yep.
exactly. Like, it's just he's doing his part for this team. He was asked to do more last week, I'd say, is the one thing with the Kansas City game. You're going up with the Chiefs. You're going to need to be, really getting things going through the air. Breece Hall is still on a snap count limitation. And then this week, he didn't need to do much because the ground game was doing it for him. Breece Hall, we need to give him some love here as well, too.
Yep.
We mentioned the numbers before, but, the breakaway touchdown run, the story was when Breece Hall was the lead, back last year, and even after, he goes down, the Jets still win that game against the Broncos. They were 5-2. They were off to a pretty damn good start with him leading the way for this offense. This is kind of the workload that we want to see through the rest of the season, because it will make the life of the defense easier, keeping the opposing offenses off the field, and it will keep Zach Wilson's life easier because teams will have to start shrinking in on that offensive line and open up for some great play action opportunities. So
Yeah.
Breece Hall, love what we saw today.
Yeah. Brees Hall. I mean, this is a perfect example of, like, this is a win that was on Brees Hall's back,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, if Brees Hall's not on this team, do we win this game? I'm not sure, maybe, but maybe not. And we talked about how excited we were for the increased workload, and then to immediately come out with 22 carries, or, whatever it was, for 177 yards. It's like, that is what we were looking for. That is how you know, just take over a game by yourself. and we talked a lot about the running back snaps. Definitely Dalvin Cook is not being used a ton and being phased out a little bit. He had a couple pop plays today for like 5 to 10 yards, maybe twice. But you look at the snaps at running back. You have Breece with 32, your boy Michael Carter with 20, and then Cook down there at 10. So
Mm-hmm.
your prediction kind of that shift coming did definitely come to fruition. And the running back room was effective. So it's kind of like, hey,
Right.
Breece Hall is your best player. Let this guy ride, and I think that's definitely going to be the game plan moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would even say Dalvin had in those 10 snaps probably the best few
Yeah,
plays of his
definitely.
season so far as well too. So it's not that he
I'd
necessarily is
agree.
completely gone here, but it's definitely that shift that's coming where you're seeing Michael Carter being used a little bit more. Keep the fresh legs, the young legs going. Um, the only other thing offensively, kind of a quiet night for Garrett Wilson. Actually, there's two
Yep.
more things we need to go over. But speaking on Garrett Wilson, look, Pat Surtain, as bad as we want to say the Jets defense is, or the Broncos defense is, excuse me, Pat Surtain is one of the best cornerbacks in football. And, he was following Garrett Wilson around and, 3 catches for 54, still not a bad day, just a quieter day than you would expect from a team's
Yeah.
star wide receiver one.
Yeah, definitely. I was hoping to see more Garrett Wilson in this game. But I will say it did seem game planned.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a lot of plays in key situations, third downs when you really needed a play. And Zach wasn't even really looking at that side of the field. It'd be a play to Conklin to the left or something like that. And I think that makes sense. Like obviously you want to get Garrett Wilson involved, but when you have a guy like Pat Surtain, he's just able to make those plays, and you see it. He got that interception at the end that's on a fluke play, but he's one of those elite corners that's able to kind of make a crazy play like that. And it did almost kind of seem like the Jets were kind of saying, hey, we're going to use Garrett Wilson almost as a decoy to really, hey, go put your best player on him. We'll figure out stuff elsewhere, which it kind of just is what it is. He was still able to show up because he's an elite player, make a couple big plays. Zach
Mm-hmm.
was able to find him a little, but obviously, you do want to see him have more of a role. But it does kind of feel like Pat Surtain was the reason today. Just game
Yep.
plan.
When you got a quarterback that maybe isn't the best in the world, why threaten,
Yep.
more turnovers against? And he still got an interception. Like Surtain did
Yeah.
get that crazy pick, despite having a pretty quiet day, at least in the, how many times he was targeted. I don't know if there's anything else you want with the offense, but the last thing I was thinking as well, too, Elijah Vera Tucker goes
Yep. That's
down
the news.
with calf, Achilles, MRI tomorrow. We'll find out more. Doesn't sound great that he was immediately ruled out. He also had Mackay get banged up a couple times, but he came back through.
Yeah.
But man, the offensive line shift up, move around. It had been doing well. Laken Tomlinson, I'll give him another shout out while we're talking O-line, had a really huge block on that big Breece touchdown. Good game for him as well, too. He's picked it up the last 3. ABT going down. That's not what you want to see.
Yeah.
Second year in a row now in this game against Denver. He leaves with what could be, another serious injury.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we've talked about ABT a ton, and he's an elite player. And with his move to right tackle, this new kind of variation of this offensive line has really been very good over
Mm-hmm.
the past few games. Um, so to see, a guy that is potentially our best lineman go down is obviously not ideal. Um, when him and Mackay both came out in the same drive, that's when you really started to worry.
Ooh,
You have Max
yeah.
Mitchell out there, you have Billy Turner out there. Mackay was able to come back, got injured again, was able to come back. So hopefully he's all right. Um, but yeah, losing AVT is tough. Hopefully, if that's the only loss and other guys can stay healthy, then we can kind of bear our way through it. But I think there was a Tipman injury as well. I do think he ended up playing, but
Yeah, Salas said
got a little
he's
banged
fine.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good to hear. Good to hear. But, you know, AVT is the man. Losing him would hurt.
Yep. Anything else offensively?
I don't think so. I think
No.
we covered it.
Yeah. So
Promising
let's.
day, but they left a lot out there, I think.
Yeah,
I think that's kind
exactly.
of the takeaway.
If
And
you
that
had
could be viewed as a
touchdowns,
negative or a positive.
if you had touchdowns instead of field goals, this would have been looking a lot like the Broncos game against the
Right.
Dolphins a few weeks ago, where we're in the 50s and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, Zach
Um,
Wilson just put up 30. That is uncharted territory.
Put up 24.
Yeah, true. But you know what I mean.
We'll look back and say, hey, 30-point game for the
22,
Jets. Yeah,
safety.
yeah.
Take
Shit,
away the
that's
field goal. No, I'm
amazing.
just kidding.
Yes. Um, Teddy, I guess the big thing defensively, we talked about this past week too. It came out a little bit before the game started. Carl Lawson, healthy and active. And I guess what coincided with that was the, steady emergence of the one of the guys that, was starting to outgain him the last few weeks, Bryce Huff. Now
Yep.
becoming a 3-down player on this defensive line for the Jets, was out there for a career high 47% of the snaps in this game. Was great. I thought the D-line as a whole did very well for parts of this game.
Yep.
Jermaine had a really solid game as well too. Quincy, when he was surprised when D coordinator. Why am I blanking on names right now? Actually, I can tell you why I'm a little stoned. But Ulbrich.
Ulbrich.
Yep, thank you. I got there. Ulbrich, when Quincy was surprised when Ulbrich called up a blitz and he comes down and gets the sack on Russell Wilson at one point. You take a look, you say 21 points. Really what they did is they kept Russell Wilson in front of them, and this entire offense as a whole in front of them the entire day. It was a lot of dink and dunk. Russell 20 of 31 for 196 and 2 touchdowns. There was like 58 of that through the first almost 3 quarters is what it felt like. So a lot of garbage time numbers there for Russ in the passing game, but I thought it was a good performance by the Jets defense again.
Yeah, definitely solid. I do definitely think that. And you'll look at kind of the game, and there's definitely moments where the Broncos were able to move the ball on us, and they were able to put up points. But I mean, you look at that first half, multiple times the Broncos were able to get down in the red zone. We stopped them for 3. Obviously you let up the early touchdown. Um, I do just want to point out, this defense today let up, about 300 yards, and constantly over this, beginning of this season, there has been those moments where you're like, man, can we just get off the field? Or they are kind of gaining on us, and it does feel like that's often in the first half. And it feels like teams are able to do very specific things against our defense. We have high shells, we have really good corners on the outside. Teams don't usually just ball with their outside receivers on us, but what they do is they're able to dump it down to the running back. They're able to get their tight ends involved, slot players involved. And a lot of times their quarterbacks have been able to run the ball, and that's what we saw today in the first half. You saw, screen after screen after screen, and you saw Russell Wilson just running and running and running. And that's how they were able to just move the ball on us 100% of the time. And then we came out in the second half and basically just shut that down. I was watching the Jets post game on SNY, and I thought it was a really interesting conversation that they were having. I believe it was Willie Colon, and he's basically saying, like, there's just absolutely no reason that we're not able to make some of these adjustments like before halftime and actually, put some pressure on our defensive players and say, hey, you're a smart guy. Let's change this up now and start doing things right. Because why are we just allowing them? We just allowed the Broncos to do what they wanted to do offensively in the first half, and then came out in the second half with adjustments. The way he said it, he said, let's take the kid gloves off the defense. We kind of had to do that with the offense and Zach Wilson and get him, some trust in him. It feels like this defense, we can do that too. Another thing to point out is, like, we're so committed to playing zone, and then we'll make the adjustments and play more man in the second half. And it's like, why can't we just say, hey, you guys are freaking studs. Let's man up now and make these changes now. So, I don't think it was a bad game by the defense by any means, but there is some of that criticism. And this defense hasn't been a top 3 unit in the league. Maybe it's been a top 10 or top 12 unit in the league, but it hasn't been the same. Like, you will not really move the ball. You will not gain yards. You will likely not score touchdowns, that it was last year. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I was going to say, would you attest it to simply, the play calling aspect of that, or are there certain position groups that we're not getting the same juice out of? Because you would still argue last year we did a poor job, I guess, of bringing the quarterback down. So you can't really say that on the edge. It's all been that, I think the edge presence, the emergence of Jermaine has been great. Bryce Huff being out there as a 3-down player, like that's been good. On the inside, I feel like we're still, doing a good job. They did get gashed in the run game a little bit, in that first half as well, too. I mean, you take a look at, McLaughlin averaged 7.6 yards a carry. Now he only had 9 touches on the ground, but, that's a pretty significant number there as well, too. Linebackers, I feel good about them. The
Yeah.
corners were banged up today. I'm trying to, what do you think it comes down to mostly just the play calling aspect? Because I've been happy with most units here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I do like, I think you point to the coaching because consistently in games, you've seen us, get out coach in the scripted plays in the first couple drives of the game. And it's all of a sudden, it's like, okay, we're down 7, we're down 10, like we were able to let them score immediately on their first drive. Last week, we were able to get down into a 17-0 hole. So it just kind of feels like, why are we letting them run these same screen passes to Jaleel McLaughlin, throughout the entire first half? But then we're able to just completely shut it down in the second half. Like, outside of the Cowboys game, really every game has been a team gets a big lead on us, and then we've been able to come back slightly, and either get the win or not. But I don't know. You just wonder why we're able to really clamp it down after we make those adjustments compared to like, hey, we know what they're doing in the first half. Let's make these adjustments now. Just something to point out.
Yeah, and something to keep an eye on is the next few weeks. Come on, obviously a really talented offense next week, and one of the NFL's few remaining undefeated teams in
Yeah.
the in the Philadelphia Eagles. But yeah, you're going to need, especially in a game like that, you're going to need the defense to be out there playing a great
Yeah.
game for all 4 quarters. So that'll be interesting to watch. Any other big storylines for the defense? I mean, I continue to say Quincy Williams is playing like
Yeah.
one of the best linebackers in football.
Today might have been his best game. And I think last week was his best game. So
can't believe it. He has been unbelievable. He's playing at at least a Pro Bowl level, if not better, this year at the linebacker position. Big Q had a few good plays there. Obviously nice for Bryce Hall to step in a reserve role. And then even at one point, we were down, obviously DJ the entire game, but Sauce went out for a little bit, but then Bryce to come in. Like you said, the outside receivers did not have a busy day at all. Cortland Sutton, one of their big names, 1 catch for 13 yards. Judy, was really the big target today, 6 for 50. Good job. Great job.
I mean, yeah, you think about this game and it's like they weren't able to throw it on us. They weren't really able to run it on us. Like, it really does feel like it was only the screen passes and the quarterback runs, and like, you watch the second half, like, I don't know if you had the sound on necessarily, but they kept saying, the Broncos have run, 9 plays for negative 6 yards. The Broncos have run 12 plays for negative 16 yards this half. Like we really did shut it down. So I definitely, I feel like fans jump to panic on the defense a lot. And at the end of the day, our defense is really very, very good. But kind of same as the offense. We just kind of left stuff out there today. A lot of penalties on both sides of the ball.
The first half
it was
so
just a sloppy game for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just feels like one of those games where we were able to kind of show, that we can be a pretty good offense, that we can move the ball, that we can kind of get the ball into our best players' hands. But with that said, we still didn't really take that step of like, hey, we're scoring a bunch of touchdowns, we're running, we're like, so it's kind of like, hey, good job, you scored 30 against the Broncos, you beat them by 10, like, pat on the back, we're 2-3. But the Broncos are kind of one of the worst teams in the league, and we're going to need to be able to do this, against better competition, which we've been in these games. You know, we beat the
Yeah.
Bills, we hung around with the Chiefs, but at the end of the day, we're trying to make the playoffs here. I'm really intrigued for this Eagles game next week, especially with a running quarterback of Jalen Hurts, how we're going to do against him.
It's gonna be a physical game. Physical
Yeah,
game. That Jets D
100%.
line against the Eagles offensive line.
Yeah.
Holy fuck.
Yep. Yep.
And pray for God on the flip side, this Jets O line against the Eagles D line. Like this one could, especially if AVT's injury is like legit.
Feels like
Man,
an under game to me.
yeah, that one's gonna hurt. That one's gonna hurt a little bit. Get the ball out quick,
Yeah.
Zach Wilson. Anything else from the game, Theodore? Anything we're forgetting to mention here?
No, I don't think
Fuck
so.
Sean Payton. Fuck Russell
yeah,
Wilson.
great work, Nathaniel Hackett. I'm proud of Zach Wilson for having a high completion percentage and not really making a ton of mistakes. Breece Hall's a stud. He's back. The defense, is awesome. And what we got next week, we got the Eagles.
We'll take the win.
Test for us.
We'll take the win.
Yes,
All
indeed.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. We will talk to you later this week, previewing upcoming game with the Eagles, talking any news and notes throughout the week. We appreciate you. We love you. And we'll talk to you then. Peace.
Nice.
Sweet.
Good quick one.
Sweet. Dude, it's a shit pumping up.